Love isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper that slips into your life when you least expect it. A glance that lingers too long. A voice that feels like home even when you barely know her name. They say love is meant to set you free. But what if the person who makes you feel alive is also the one who could ruin everything you've built? That's what happened to me. I wasn't looking for love. Not until she walked in, wearing red and smiling like sin. Her name was Nikki Laurent. And from that night on, nothing was ever the same. The ballroom glowed beneath the soft shimmer of chandeliers. Music floated through the air, elegant, distant, rehearsed. Guests danced, laughed, and exchanged polite lies behind champagne glasses. But I wasn't really there. I was Valerie de la Vega, CEO, heiress, and everyone's favorite picture of perfection. To them, I was untouchable, calm, elegant, always in control, until she appeared. She walked in wearing a crimson dress that looked like it was made from fire. Her hair was tied loosely, soft waves brushing her shoulders. Every step she took commanded attention, and yet, she carried herself like she owned the silence in the room. Then her eyes, sharp, playful, and confident, met mine. It felt like time held its breath. No one else existed. She smiled slightly, as if she could read the thoughts I didn't dare speak. Then she crossed the room. "Miss de la Vega," she greeted, her voice smooth as silk. "I've heard you're the woman who never loses control." I blinked, surprised. "And you are?" She tilted her head, lips curving into a grin. "Nikki Laurent," she said. "New investor. And apparently your newest problem." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Her tone was teasing, but her gaze... that gaze felt like a promise I wasn't ready for. She leaned in just enough for her perfume to find me. "Careful, Valerie," she whispered, her lips barely brushing my ear. "You look like someone who might fall in love with danger." I forced a polite smile. "Then it's a good thing I don't believe in danger." She laughed softly. "You will." And just like that, she walked away, leaving the scent of roses, and the memory of her voice echoing inside my chest. That was the night I realized I wasn't the one in control anymore. It had been 3 days since the gala. 3 days since that woman in red, Nikki Laurent, walked into my life like a spark in dry air. I told myself it was nothing, just another business connection, another face in a crowded room. But she stayed in my thoughts, in my silence, in the echo of her laugh that refused to leave me. "Ms. de la Vega, this just arrived for you," my assistant said, placing a cream-colored envelope on my desk. No sender. No seal, only my name written in a looping, confident script. My heartbeat stumbled. I opened it slowly. Inside was a note, simple and deliberate. "You looked bored that night. Meet me at Cafe Aurelia, midnight. N." I exhaled, half amused, half unsettled. Cafe Aurelia, an old, hidden spot in the city that barely anyone knew about. Intimate, quiet, dangerous. I should have ignored it. I had a reputation, an empire to protect, and a heart I swore was off limits. But curiosity has its own way of sounding like fate. The cafe was almost empty when I arrived. Soft jazz hummed in the background, and the scent of roasted coffee mixed with faint perfume. Then I saw her sitting by the window. Red lipstick, black dress, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "You came," she said, her tone warm, teasing. I wasn't sure if the queen of De La Vega Enterprises would risk being seen with me. I sat across from her, trying to steady my voice. "You're quite sure of yourself," she smiled. "Confidence looks good on me." Her gaze softened, though enough to make me forget how to breathe for a second. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "For the other night, you looked like you needed someone to interrupt your perfect little world." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think you're that someone?" "I know I am." Her words hit like a challenge, but her eyes said something else entirely. Something unguarded. The silence between us stretched. Her hand brushed against mine, a fleeting touch, but electric. "Tell me, Valerie," Nikki whispered, "when was the last time you did something just because it made your heart race?" I looked at her, the danger, the mystery, the pull I couldn't explain. And for the first time in years, I didn't have an answer. That night I didn't sleep. Her words replayed in my mind like a song that refused to end. Maybe this was how it started. Not with love, not yet, but with a woman who made me question everything I thought I controlled. The rain started just as they stepped out of the restaurant. The city lights blurred under the drizzle, painting everything in gold and silver. Valerie didn't bring an umbrella, and neither did Nikki, maybe on purpose. They stood under the small awning, too close, too quiet. The air between them was charged, fragile, waiting for something to break. "You didn't have to walk me to my car," Valerie said softly, trying to sound composed. "I wanted to," came the reply, low and certain. Nikki's tone always carried that hint of danger, the kind that made Valerie's heart betray her. She looked away, pretending to check her phone. "You really don't give up, do you?" A faint laugh escaped Nikki's lips. "Not when it comes to you." That answer made Valerie's pulse quicken. She hated how easily this woman could get under her skin, how every word felt like a touch she couldn't escape. "You don't even know me," Valerie whispered. "I know enough," Nikki said, stepping closer. "I know that you hide behind control because it's safer than admitting what you want." Valerie froze. Her breath hitched as Nikki's voice softened. "And I know," Nikki continued, "that right now you want me to stop talking." Raindrops slid down Valerie's hair as she met those eyes again, sharp, warm, and dangerously honest. She should have walked away. She knew she should. But her body didn't listen to logic. When Nikki reached out, fingers brushing against her cheek, Valerie didn't move. The world fell silent, no rain, no traffic, no noise, just the sound of her own heartbeat. Then, Nikki's lips found hers, gentle at first, testing, waiting for permission. Valerie should have stopped her. But instead, she leaned in, answering the kiss with everything she'd been holding back. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't careful. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, Valerie was the first to look away, eyes wide, heart trembling. "That shouldn't have happened," she murmured, half to herself. "But it did," Nikki replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And we both wanted it to." Valerie's chest tightened at the truth in those words. She hated how right Nikki sounded, and how much she already missed her touch. "Go home, Nikki," Valerie said finally, stepping back under the rain. "Before I make another mistake." Nikki smiled faintly, a kind of smile that knew it wasn't the end. "Too late for that," she said softly before walking away, leaving Valerie standing in the rain, lost, trembling and finally undeniably alive. For 3 days, Valerie didn't answer any of Nikki's calls. No texts, no emails, no chance encounters. She buried herself in work, convincing everyone, even herself, that nothing had happened. But every quiet moment betrayed her. Every sound of rain against the window reminded her of that night, of Nikki's voice, of the warmth she tried to forget. She thought avoiding her would make the feeling disappear. She was wrong. It was nearly 9 p.m. when Valerie finally packed her things. The building was empty, silent until a familiar voice echoed from the hallway. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." Her hands froze midair. That voice, low, teasing, and warm, could only belong to one person. "What are you doing here, Nikki?" she asked, keeping her back turned. "Trying to remember if I did something wrong," Nikki replied, stepping closer. "Or if you're just scared to admit what happened meant something." Valerie sighed, shutting her folder with more force than necessary. "You shouldn't be here. This is my workplace. And this," Nikki said quietly, "is the only place you let me see who you really are." That made Valerie turn. "You think you know me that well?" Nikki's gaze didn't waver. "I know enough to see that you're running not from me, but from yourself." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of the city lights outside filled the silence between them. Valerie finally exhaled. "You don't understand what you're getting into, Nikki." "Then make me understand," she whispered, stepping closer. Her perfume was faint, familiar, the same one from the gala, the same one that haunted Valerie's memory. She hated that scent. She loved it even more. "You want the truth?" Valerie said, voice trembling slightly. "The reason I don't do this? It's because people like you don't stay. They come into my life, make it messy, and then leave when they've had enough of the thrill." Nikki frowned, hurt flickering in her eyes. "That's what you think of me?" "I don't think it, Nikki," Valerie said quietly. "I've lived it." Nikki's next words came out barely above a whisper. "Who was she?" Valerie froze. The question hit too close, too deep. She looked away, her silence giving the answer Nikki feared. "I'm not her, Valerie," Nikki said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." The way she said her name, soft, pleading, almost made Valerie believe her. But belief was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "I can't do this," Valerie murmured, turning away. "Whatever this is, it has to stop." She started to walk past her, but Nikki caught her wrist gently, carefully, like she was holding something breakable. "Then at least tell me one thing," Nikki whispered. "If none of this matters to you, why are you shaking right now?" Valerie didn't answer. She couldn't. Her pulse betrayed her. Her silence confessed everything her words refused to say. And when Nikki finally let go, the warmth of her hand lingered long after she walked away. That night, Valerie locked herself in her office. Staring at the skyline, her reflection in the glass looked steady. But her heart wasn't. Because the truth was simple, and it terrified her more than anything. She was falling for Nikki Laurent, and deep down she already knew Nikki was hiding something too. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Valerie arrived at the office early, hoping work would drown out the memories that refused to leave her alone. But even the endless reports and board emails couldn't quiet the voice in her head, the one that whispered her name. Nikki. That night in the rain, that look in her eyes. It didn't feel like something new. It felt remembered. The doors opened with a soft chime. As Valerie stepped inside, a voice from behind made her freeze. "Good morning, Miss Della Vega." Her pulse spiked. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "What are you doing here?" Valerie asked. keeping her tone sharp as she faced her reflection in the mirror-like elevator wall. "Investor meeting," Nikki said casually, stepping beside her. "Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble." "You already did," Valerie muttered. Nikki smirked faintly. "Then maybe I should at least make it worth your while." Her tone was light, but there was something different in her eyes. Something softer, something almost regretful. When the elevator stopped at the top floor, Nikki didn't step out immediately. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and handed Valerie a small envelope. "Before you decide to keep hating me," Nikki said quietly, "read this." Valerie hesitated. "What is it?" "Something I should have told you from the start," Nikki murmured. "About why I'm really here." Then she walked out, leaving Valerie frozen inside the elevator, clutching the envelope like it was something dangerous. She sat down, heart pounding as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a photograph, old, worn, and yellowed with time. 2 young girls, maybe 8 or 9, sitting by a garden fountain, one with pigtails smiling shyly. The other, bold and bright-eyed, had her arm protectively around the first. On the back of the photo was a name written in faded ink. Valérie and Nicolette 1999. Her breath hitched. Nicolette, her childhood best friend. The girl who used to live next door, the one who vanished after her parents' sudden death. Her hands trembled as the realization sank in. Nikki Laurent wasn't a stranger. She was Nicolette. The same Nicolette who used to chase her through the gardens, who once promised, "If we ever get lost, I'll always find you again." Valerie pressed a hand to her lips, the room spinning around her. The walls she built over the years, cold, unbreakable, began to crack. Nikki had found her again, but she hadn't said a word. Why now? Why after all this time? The questions burned like fire in her chest. And for the first time since they met, Valerie didn't know whether to be angry or grateful that destiny had brought her back. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains, brushing softly against Valerie's bare shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open to the unfamiliar, quiet, the kind that hums right. After a storm, she turned to her side and saw Nikki still asleep, her face peaceful, a faint smile curving her lips. Valerie couldn't help but stare. She reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair away from Nikki's face. How can someone look this soft even after everything? A small sigh escaped her lips. She wanted to stay there, just watching, memorizing every inch of the woman beside her. But reality always finds its way in, like light slipping through cracks. Nikki stirred, eyes blinking open. "You're awake," she murmured, voice still hoarse from sleep. "Yeah," Valerie whispered. "Couldn't really sleep." Nikki stretched slightly, pulling the blanket closer. "Because of last night?" Valerie didn't answer right away. She sat up, clutching the edge of the sheet. "Because of everything." Silence, the kind that says too much. Nikki sat up too, her gaze soft but searching. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "Whatever that was, I don't." Valerie turned to her, eyes shining with something between fear and longing. "You don't understand, Nikki. This," she gestured between them, "this isn't supposed to happen." "But it did," Nikki replied. Her tone carried a quiet defiance. "And pretending it didn't won't change that." Valerie stood, gathering her clothes from the floor. You make it sound simple. Maybe it's not simple, Nikki said, finally standing up too, her bare feet brushing against the cold tiles. But it's real. Isn't that what matters? Valerie froze. The words hit too close. She turned slowly, meeting Nikki's eyes, the same eyes that made her forget every reason she shouldn't fall. Real things break, Valerie whispered, almost to herself. Nikki stepped closer, stopping just inches away. Then let it break. At least we felt something before it did. The air between them was heavy, fragile. Valerie wanted to believe her to stay, to fall, to stop running from something that already owned her. But the weight of the world outside that room pressed against her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling. You make it sound easy to choose you. Nikki's smile was sad. It's not easy. But it's worth it. Valerie didn't reply. She just stood there, torn between staying and saving herself. And as Nikki reached out to touch her hand, Valerie took a step back, because sometimes love isn't about what feels right, but what you can't bear to lose. The air between them had changed. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the quiet, almost invisible kind. The kind that settles in the pauses between words, or in the glances that last a second too long. Valerie walked down the hallway, coffee in hand, her eyes fixed on anything but the person walking toward her. Nikki. Same confident stride, same soft eyes that once looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. But now Valerie didn't dare look back. Morning, Nikki greeted, her tone careful, too careful. Valerie managed a small nod, not trusting her voice. Morning, she murmured, already turning toward her desk. The office buzzed with the usual chatter, but for Valerie, everything felt too sharp, too bright. Every laugh, every tap on the keyboard, all of it drowned beneath the sound of her heartbeat, echoing the memory of Nikki's voice, her touch, her warmth. Nikki leaned on the edge of Valerie's desk. So, we're just not going to talk about it? She asked softly, her tone wrapped in a mix of sarcasm and hurt. Valerie froze, eyes still glued to her computer screen. There's nothing to talk about, she said flatly. Nikki's laugh was low, bitter. You really think that? I know that, Valerie replied, forcing her voice steady. What happened was a mistake. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Nikki stood there, searching Valerie's face for any sign of the woman who once kissed her like she meant it. You don't get to erase it just because you're scared. Valerie's hands trembled slightly on the keyboard. I'm not scared. Then what are you? Nikki asked, stepping closer. Valerie met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, everything stopped, the noise, the air, the world. Only the two of them existed. I'm trying to survive, Valerie whispered. Nikki's expression softened, her anger fading into something more fragile. Survive what, Val? Valerie swallowed hard. You. The silence that followed was heavy. Nikki took a small step back, like she'd just been hit. Right, she said quietly. Guess I should have seen that coming. She turned and walked away slowly, like she was hoping Valerie would stop her. But she didn't. Valerie sat there staring at her screen, eyes glassy. Every word she said was a lie wrapped in self-defense. Because the truth was simpler. Crueler, she wasn't surviving without Nikki either. Nights had grown longer since that morning. Nikki lay awake most of the time, her phone resting on her chest, the screen lighting up now and then, never with the name she wanted to see. She'd scroll through their old messages sometimes, fingers hovering over the delete button, but she never could. Every text felt like a ghost she couldn't bury. The city outside was still alive laughter, traffic, life, but inside her apartment, everything was quiet, heavy, and hollow. At work, she learned how to pretend. She smiled when she had to. She joked with their co-workers. But every time she caught a glimpse of Valerie from across the room, her calm face, her carefully distant voice, Nikki felt something twist inside her chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was grief. One afternoon, she found herself walking past the cafe they used to go to after work. The smell of coffee and cinnamon hit her like memory. She froze by the window. The table by the corner was empty. The same one where Valerie once spilled her drink while laughing too hard at Nikki's stupid joke. She walked in before she could stop herself. The barista recognized her immediately. "The usual?" Nikki hesitated. "Yeah, 2 caramel macchiatos," she said softly. Then, after a pause, added, "To go." When the drinks came, she sat down anyway, staring at the empty seat across from her. A part of her wanted to hate Valerie for making her feel like this, for running when things got real. But another part, the louder one, just missed her. She whispered into her cup. "You said you weren't scared, Valerie. So why did you run?" Her phone buzzed. A message. Her heart skipped, but it wasn't Valerie. Just another work notification. Nikki smiled bitterly and locked the screen. She stood up, took one last sip of the coffee that didn't even taste right anymore, and whispered to the empty space across the table, "I'll stop waiting for you." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. It had been 3 weeks since Valerie last spoke to Nikki. 3 weeks of silence that stretched like a bruise she couldn't stop pressing. She told herself she was fine, that she could bury what happened, lock it away, and go back to how things used to be. But the lie started to crumble the moment she saw Nikki across the lobby that morning. She wasn't alone. Nikki was laughing, leaning against the counter while some guy from marketing said something that made her smile that same soft, effortless smile Valerie used to think was hers. Something sharp twisted inside her chest. She didn't have the right to feel it, but it didn't stop the ache. "Val?" a coworker called out, snapping her back. "You okay?" "Yeah," she lied, forcing a small smile. "Just tired." But her eyes lingered on Nikki. The way she tilted her head. The way she laughed with that open warmth. It looked real. Maybe she really moved on. The thought made Valerie's hands tremble. Later that day, she found herself outside, smoking a cigarette she didn't even like. She wasn't thinking clearly, just replaying every moment in her head, every word she shouldn't have said. When Nikki walked out of the building, Valerie froze. Their eyes met for a second, a split second that felt like 1,000 apologies unsaid. Nikki was the first to look away. She walked past her, pretending not to care, her heels clicking against the pavement. But Valerie saw the way her shoulders stiffened, the way she exhaled shakily when she thought no one was watching. Valerie dropped her cigarette and crushed it under her heel. "I can't do this anymore," she muttered to herself. That night, she went home to an apartment that suddenly felt too big, too quiet. Every shadow whispered her name. She poured herself a glass of wine, then another. By the third, she couldn't take it anymore. Her phone screen glowed in the dark. She opened Nikki's name in her contacts. Her thumb hovered over call. Seconds passed. Then she typed instead, "I saw you today. You looked happy. I'm glad." She stared at the message, fingers trembling, then deleted it before sending. Her chest ached. The words she couldn't say were the ones that burned the most. "God, Nikki," she whispered into the empty room. What did we do to each other? The rain had been falling since sunset, soft at first, then heavy, until it blurred the whole city into silver streaks. Valerie sat by her office window long after everyone else had gone home, watching the water slide down the glass. She told herself she was waiting for the rain to stop. But deep down, she knew she was waiting for something else. Or someone else. The door opened behind her. Footsteps echoed against the tile, hesitant, familiar. Valerie didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You're still here," Nikki's voice came, quiet but firm. Valerie exhaled, eyes fixed on the downpour outside. "Couldn't leave. The rain's bad." Nikki stepped closer, arms folded. "You could have taken a cab, or asked someone to drive you. Didn't want to bother anyone," Valerie replied softly. Nikki let out a bitter laugh. "You never do?" That made Valerie turn. Nikki stood there, damp from the rain, hair slightly sticking to her cheeks, eyes sharp and aching all at once. "What are you doing here?" Valerie asked, her voice low, guarded. "Returning your file," Nikki said, holding up a folder. But she didn't move to give it. "And maybe something else." Valerie frowned. "Nikki, no," Nikki cut her off, stepping closer. "You don't get to keep doing this. Avoiding me, acting like none of it meant anything." Valerie looked away, gripping the edge of her desk. "I never said it didn't mean anything." "Then what was it?" Nikki's voice cracked slightly. "Because I'm losing my mind trying to figure it out." Valerie stayed quiet, her throat tight. Nikki took another step closer, her tone breaking into something raw. "Was it just a moment for you? Some mistake you could erase when it got too hard?" Valerie finally met her eyes. "It wasn't a mistake." "Then why are you running from it?" Nikki asked, her voice trembling. "From me?" Valerie's words came out like a confession she'd been holding too long. "Because you make me want things I'm not allowed to want." The room fell silent except for the sound of rain hitting glass. Nikki's eyes softened. "Val, we're not hurting anyone." "You don't understand," Valerie whispered. "You could move on. You could love someone freely, but me..." She shook her head, voice breaking. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what people expect." "And has that ever made you happy?" Nikki asked. Valerie didn't answer. Nikki stepped even closer until their faces were inches apart. "You don't have to be brave for the world. Just be honest with me." Valerie closed her eyes. "You'll hate me if I do." Nikki reached up, brushing away a tear that had escaped down Valerie's cheek. "Try me." For a long moment, the world outside vanished. The rain, the rules, the fear, all of it blurred away until there was only this. Valerie's hand found Nikki's, fingers trembling, hearts unguarded. And when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I never stopped thinking about you." Nikki's breath hitched, her thumb tracing Valerie's wrist. "Then stop thinking," she said softly. "Just feel." The next second, Nikki leaned in and the space between them dissolved. The kiss wasn't desperate this time. It was slow, deliberate. The kind that said everything they'd been too afraid to admit. Outside, the rain poured harder. But inside, for the first time in weeks, Valerie finally felt warm. The world smelled like rain and coffee. Valerie woke up to the soft rhythm of droplets tapping against the window pane. Her head rested on Nikki's shoulder, the faint warmth of her breath brushing her hair. For a moment, she didn't move, afraid that if she did, the morning would fade and reality would rush back in. Nikki stirred beside her, eyes half open, lips curved in that lazy smile Valerie secretly loved. "You're awake," she murmured. Valerie nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Didn't want to forget this." Nikki turned her head slightly, looking at her with quiet fondness. "You won't." Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was soft, fragile, the kind that made both of them want to breathe slower just to make it last longer. For the first time in weeks, Valerie didn't feel like running. She reached for the cup of coffee sitting on the bedside table and handed it to Nikki. "Still black?" Nikki grinned, taking it from her. "Still judging me for it?" Valerie smiled faintly. "Always." They both laughed, the kind that didn't hide behind tension this time. But as the laughter faded, Nikki's gaze grew serious. "Val," she said softly, setting the cup down. "What happens now?" Valerie looked down at her hands. The question hung between them like a thread ready to snap. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know that last night I stopped pretending." Nikki leaned forward, her fingers gently brushing Valerie's. "Then don't start again." Valerie looked up, meeting her eyes. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it is," Nikki said quietly. "Maybe it's just about choosing to be honest, even if it scares us." Valerie took a deep breath. The truth she'd been swallowing for so long finally slipped through her lips. "I'm scared, Nick, of losing everything. Of everyone finding out. Of people seeing me differently." Nikki's expression softened. "You won't lose everything. Just the things that were never meant to stay." The words hit her harder than she expected. Valerie reached out, cupping Nikki's cheek with trembling fingers. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Nikki whispered. "But it's worth it." Valerie smiled faintly. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Their foreheads touched, two hearts trying to find steady ground in the storm they created. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, sunlight beginning to peek through the clouds. It felt symbolic somehow, like the world had decided to give them a small mercy. Valerie pressed a soft kiss to Nikki's lips, a quiet promise hidden in the way she lingered there. "Just stay," she murmured. "For now, stay." Nikki smiled against her mouth. "I was never planning to leave." And for the first time in a long time, Valerie let herself believe it. The rain had stopped, but the quiet tension hadn't. By Monday morning, the office felt sharper, louder, as if the world had turned its volume back up. Valerie walked in with her usual calm expression, holding her coffee like armor. She'd practiced her smile in the mirror, the one that said everything's normal. But nothing was. Nikki was already there, sitting at her desk, scrolling through something on her screen. When she looked up, their eyes met for less than a second, just enough for Valerie's heart to stutter. "Morning," Nikki said, tone light, professional. "Morning," Valerie replied, the same practiced calm, but her voice cracked a little at the end. The day went on like that stolen glances, Quiet brushes of hands when they passed each other papers. Conversations cut too short before anyone could notice. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of slipping through the cracks. During lunch, one of their coworkers, Liza, leaned across the table with a teasing grin. "So, what's going on with you and Nikki?" Valerie almost choked on her drink. "What?" Liza laughed. "Come on. I've seen the way you two look at each other. There's something there." Nikki froze beside her, the fork halfway to her mouth. Valerie forced a small laugh. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Liza smirked. "Then why do you both turn red whenever I bring it up?" Nikki jumped in quickly, her tone easy, casual. "Because you're ridiculous, Liza." Everyone laughed, the tension melting into the chatter of lunch, but Valerie could still feel her pulse hammering in her throat. Later, when the office quieted down again, Nikki found her in the hallway near the elevators. "You okay?" she asked softly. Valerie exhaled. "Barely. You?" Nikki leaned against the wall, her eyes tired but soft. "I hate pretending I don't know you." Valerie smiled sadly. "I hate that we have to." The elevator doors opened, and a few people stepped out, laughing about something trivial. Nikki moved aside quickly, putting distance between them again. Valerie watched as she disappeared around the corner, that same ache curling inside her chest. When the last person left, Valerie whispered to the empty space, "How long can we keep doing this?" She didn't know the answer, but the question followed her home that night, lingering like perfume she couldn't wash off. And when she checked her phone before bed, she saw Nikki's message. "If the world knew, would you still hold my hand?" Valerie stared at the screen for a long time, her heart in her throat. Her reply came slow, deliberate. "Yes, but I'd be terrified while doing it." Seconds later, Nikki replied, "Then I'll hold it tight enough for both of us." Valerie smiled small, tired but real. Outside, the city glowed with 1,000 lights. But for once, she wasn't afraid of being seen. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that started ordinary papers piled on Valerie's desk. Meetings running late, coffee gone cold. She and Nikki had promised themselves to be careful, to keep their distance when others were around. But love, when it's real, has a way of slipping through the cracks of caution. By late afternoon, the rain had started again. Nikki stood by the window, her reflection ghosted against the glass. Valerie walked over quietly, holding a file in one hand. "You forgot this," she said softly. Nikki turned, smiling faintly. "You didn't have to bring it." "I wanted to," Valerie admitted. The words lingered tender, dangerous. And before either of them could think twice, Valerie brushed a strand of hair behind Nikki's ear, her fingers tracing the warmth of her skin. Nikki's eyes closed, leaning into the touch like it was something sacred. "Val," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," Valerie breathed. Someone could see, but she didn't move away, because for once pretending felt heavier than the truth. Then came the sound, the faint click of a camera phone. They both turned. At the doorway stood one of their co-workers, eyes wide. Phone still in hand, shock frozen on her face. "Oh my God," she muttered, before quickly walking away. Nikki's stomach dropped. Valerie stepped back, her heart pounding. The silence that followed was deafening. Within hours, whispers began to spread, quiet at first, then louder, until they echoed in every corner of the office. By morning, Valerie's inbox was full of meeting requests, check-ins, and a vague HR notice. She sat in her car at lunch, staring at her phone. Message after message from Nikki filled the screen. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Please talk to me. We'll figure it out, Val. But Valerie couldn't answer. Not yet. Her hands trembled as she wiped at her eyes, the weight of every fear she'd ever had pressing down on her chest. When Nikki finally found her later that day in the parking lot, Valerie was already standing in the rain, no umbrella, staring at nothing. Nikki ran to her. Val, please. Talk to me. Valerie turned slowly, her eyes glassy, her voice breaking. I told you this would ruin everything. Nikki shook her head, rain dripping from her hair. It didn't ruin anything. It just made it real. Valerie laughed bitterly. Real? Everyone's talking, Nikki. HR's waiting for me upstairs. My family. Her voice cracked. They'll find out. Nikki stepped closer, rain soaking through her shirt. Then let them. Let the world know. I don't care anymore. Valerie's tears mixed with the rain. You don't understand. You can still walk away. I can't. Nikki's voice broke. Then tell me to go. Tell me you don't love me and I will. The rain pounded harder. Valerie opened her mouth, but no words came, only the truth she'd been too afraid to speak. I love you, she whispered, trembling. God help me, I love you. Nikki closed the distance between them, pulling her in. Their lips met, desperate, soaked, defiant. The world could watch. Let them. Because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the whispers. Not the fear. Not the storm that waited tomorrow. Only this, the truth. The love and the rain that baptized them both. That night, Valerie wrote in her journal, the same one she once used to list reasons. Why she couldn't love her. Maybe love isn't meant to be hidden. Maybe it's meant to be seen. No matter how the world looks back. Nikki's name filled the final line. No titles, no explanations. Just truth raw, reckless, and real. And for the first time in her life, Valerie didn't feel afraid. Because loving Nikki wasn't her mistake. It was her freedom.